We now have a bit of a timetable now for how long Sam Bennett is going to be out. We're going to discuss the impact of him out of the lineup, how Florida has been there before when it comes to injuries and their depth at center now that the series has shifted to Tampa.
You're Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Into this Thursday, April 25th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We're your team every day. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. I'm Armando Velez from the Hockey News. You can follow me on X at MondoMan12. Follow the show account on X and Instagram at LO_FLA Panthers. And shout out to everydayers who come back here and get your daily Florida Panthers fix. Today's episode is brought to you by Monopoly Go. I admit it, I have a competitive side and is a big fan of Monopoly Go, the mobile hit twist on classic Monopoly. So join your friends and download Monopoly Go, now free, available on the App Store or Google Play. So, Florida Panther fans, the series has now shifted to Tampa Bay, where the Florida Panthers take their 2-0 series lead into Amalie Arena for a big opportunity to now steal one on the road, where we discussed mostly about the Florida Panthers and one of the best road records, getting 26 of those wins in the regular season. Now they get to put that to the test, but it's going to be an uphill battle for them, even with them being up with now the Sam Bennett and his timetable of not being in the lineup. But we're going to discuss that and more with our guest here on today's edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. And he has quite a few affiliations attached to him. You have Florida Hockey Now, you have the Associated Press, you've had the Palm Beach Post, all within his line of work, past or present. He is Colby Guy. Colby, welcome back to the show. Glad to have you here. And as I have made my way to Tampa already, and you will be right behind me just in less than 12 hours. So welcome to the show, my friend.
Thank you. It's with a lot of those affiliations, it's definitely busy for me, especially this time of the year. But I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, it's so funny because the other day you were asking a question saying Colby Guy of Florida Hockey Now, and then switched it Colby Guy of the AP. So thought that was a little funny of how you switched it back and forth between the two there. So hey, whatever keeps you busy. For you, and hey, we love the work that you do as always, you and George Richards. But let's discuss more of the latest with the injury front for the Florida Panthers. Obviously, the last 35 minutes for the Panthers, they were without Sam Bennett, and we've seen it before with the injuries for the Panthers. I mean, it happened in the preseason where Sam Bennett gets injured against the Tampa Bay Lightning, misses a little bit of time, even the beginning of the season, missed game 1 of the Boston series last year. Now, once again, with taking the slap shot off the just under the glove by Brandon Montour back in game 2, went down the tunnel. But we did hear some great news, according to Paul Maurice, back in practice on Wednesday, about the good news coming in and just avoiding more disaster than what they thought was for the injury. So Paul Maurice said that Sam Bennett will be out at least a week. With the 2-0 series lead, them traveling to Tampa, he already said that he's ruling them out for these next 2. The fact that they have this cushion and the fact that they have so many different guys who've played center, who have been on the wing for them, it's a big luxury for them as far as depth and positioning when something like this occurs.
Yeah, for sure. There are a lot of different ways the Panthers could go about changing up those third and fourth lines to make sure that they have 4 lines that they can run, which is a lot different than they had last year. Of course, Anton Lundell will move up to the second line, and we have that on our agenda in a second. But, I mean, to look at the rest of the lineup for a second here, you can either move Eetu Luostarinen from the wing to center that third line, and you have a guy like Kyle Oposo who can come up and play third line minutes if you need him to, or you can do what they did yesterday and put in a guy like Kevin Stenlund in on the third line. He's skilled enough and capable enough to fill that role and play against those tougher guys. He's a penalty killer, and he plays really good on the defensive end. And you have a guy like Steven Lawrence who can come in and play on the fourth line. He also kills penalties if you need him to. And you have a variety of options to come in and play on the wing next to him, Cousins, Lomberg, and you got guys like Gadjevich who can come in there if Ryan Lomberg is not healthy enough to come in because he's still dealing with that illness right now. So if Ryan Lomberg can't go, you can have a fourth line like Gadjevich, Cousins, and Lawrence, and you still have a pretty deep lineup, which is a lot different than they had last year. So I think they're going to be able to weather the storm there and do fine with the amount of depth that they have. And you have a guy like Anton Lundell who has proven that he's able to come in. I mean, he had the assist on Verhaeghe's overtime winner last game, so they should be able to weather that pretty fine.
Yeah, and also with Lundell moving up, something that he's done multiple times in his short career. I remember there was a time where Barkov and Bennett were out, and then the top two centers were Anton Lundell and Eric Stahl last year. So that type of center for the Florida Panthers there last season. And I mean, even Jameson asked Paul Maurice about how much he's improved also in the faceoff dot, where Maurice spoke about D zone draws, of how important that is, of how much those numbers have, and spoke about how third line guys are more of those checking guys who are going to get him, who are trying to create something, because you're not getting the best matchups as far as getting the opportunity to go against the other guys' top players. He spoke about also how the top players are going to cancel each other out. Now he has that opportunity, and also for him, D-zone draws for him are going to be extremely important as far as not allowing the Tampa Bay Lightning to get a lot of zone time. And we've seen that for so far in these two games. I spoke about after game one, that's the hardest part to evaluate in a series of how the pace of play is going to be. Now that we've seen two games, now we're starting to see not one step closer of who's the best team. Obviously, it's been Florida with the zone time matching in special teams, and also with getting into the middle on in their offensive zone too. But big opportunity for also Lundell, especially on his strong side, to take those draws and to quickly get it out so that they could play more in the other zones of the ice.
Yeah, and Anton Lundell is a guy that peaks at the right times as far as getting into the playoffs goes. And we saw it towards the end of the regular season there. He had a stretch where he had 6 points in his last 7 games, ending the regular season there. 4 of those points were goals. And he was just a lot more confident. He took his shots at the right time. And, I mean, I've talked to him about this a lot, and he said it yesterday as well, that a lot of it is just trying not to force it as much. And, I mean, this is a guy who's coming into his first offseason where he can negotiate a contract. He's going to be a restricted free agent. And at the beginning of the year, that was something that was weighing on his head a little bit. And when it came towards the end of the season, the points started coming, and he stopped gripping the stick a bit too hard, and he started taking what the game gave him. And that's where you get plays like the big assist he had on Verhaeghe's goal, where he saw where Verhaeghe was and was able to stretch the pass through there. Or you have those 2 goals he scored against Ottawa, where he knew he had the angle, he knew he had an opportunity to shoot it, and he has an incredible shot, and he was able to score there. So he has the skill set, and he's still trying to learn exactly where to pick his spots and where not to force it. And when he's on, he is an incredible player in the defensive zone. He can kill penalties, and when playing with 2 guys like Carter Verhaeghe and Matthew Tkachuk, who Both are very good shooting the puck. Lundell's going to have a lot of opportunities to feed them the puck, and you have a guy there in Matthew Tkachuk who is very underrated when it comes to passing the puck, and he'll get the puck in good spots to get some good opportunities, and I'm sure he'll be he will be a big reason why this team wins if he's able to reach his full potential there.
Yeah, and with Lundell, especially now going bottom six to top six, and also having to read different guys' games, the difference between him having to read Lustaranen's game versus Matthew Tkachuk, and him having to do that and adjusting himself, that's definitely something that you love to see out of Anton Lundell, and how he's grown as not just a hockey player, but a human being, because that really helps him off the ice for sure too. But we're going to transition over to segment number 2, where we're going to discuss more about the continued conversation about that big save, and Paul Maurice was asked about it too, and also about how the continued questions on the depth compared to last year to this year. We're going to discuss that and more here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Monopoly Go. And I will admit that I have a little bit of a competitive side. Well, yeah, I do. And my competitive side is a big fan of Monopoly Go. I'm sure you've heard of it. It's been downloaded over 150 million times. It's a great plot twist on Monopoly, where you play on not one, but hundreds of Monopoly boards in crazy locations, building up amazing cities that bring you money. The best part is messing with your friends. You can charge them rent on iconic properties, just like classic Monopoly. Now you can also heist their vaults of riches for yourself. And the leaderboards show you who the biggest Monopoly tycoon is. But it's not just the competitive side that loves it. You can team up with friends and people all over the world in time tournaments to earn huge rewards. To get in the game with your friends. Download Monopoly Go now free on the App Store or Google Play. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day long? Have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you the can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or on the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Back on this Thursday, April 25th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day here on a Thursday, here with Colby Guy of Florida Hockey Now and the AP and the Palm Beach Post here on the show. And so, Colby, it's been over 24 hours since the save, and it's still a big conversation, a big topic around the world of the Florida Panthers. National shows are talking about it, highlight reels, even on Sports Center too. And then Paul Maurice was asked about it just the next day, and also, which when you really think about his answer, and asked if he had an opportunity to watch it, he says he's been in this business a long time. He said, I don't even need to turn on the TV. I know that it's going to be a topic of conversation. He spoke about Bobrovsky. That's a lifetime worth of work to make a save like that. And also how, because of the run that the Panthers went on last year, and then seeing a kind of save that Sergei Bobrovsky made, it's an opportunity for someone to grow the game for when someone puts on the pads, they want to make a save, something like that. It's kind of like Steph Curry in basketball shooting all those long range threes too. That save by Bobrovsky could be something similar to that. Your thoughts now on that save more than 24 hours after the fact?
Yeah, I mean, I still can't believe it happened. Like, just rewatching the clips, there's one where it's Matt Dumba with the puck, and Sergei Bobrovsky's back completely turned to him, and it just does not feel real that it happened. Like, you see that one frame of that whole clip, and you're like, how how in the world did he not score that? Like,
Mm.
how? So I was talking to my dad this morning about it actually, and I mean he's been watching hockey even longer than me, and he just could not believe it. And he was on the phone with my mom when it happened, and he was just like, "Holy shit, Bob, Bob, Bob!" And that's what my dad was like. But I'm sure for people around the world, I mean, everyone's in shock because that's just not something you see every day. But I mean, over the course of his career, Sergei Bobrovsky has proven that he is one of the most athletic goalies in the entire world. And if there's one guy that can make a save like that, that's him. And he puts in the work. He's out there early every single morning skate, every single practice, and he works to be able to be as athletic enough to be able to get the pad down and make the save there.
And it's a veteran type of save too, based on everything that he's worked through from being undrafted, Philadelphia, Columbus, 2 Vezina trophies, a Stanley Cup final, now with just building up his Hall of Fame resume. I'm not afraid to say that. I'm really not after everything now last season for him. And speaking of veterans, I want to take this opportunity to now shift to another veteran that spoke to the media today in Vladimir Tarasenko. And so he was asked about really the Battle of Florida, and also with now getting a feel of the rivalry with them. And he spoke about how much it means to other guys in the locker room, and understanding that he's the new guy there, and the fact that other players have dealt with the losses of the cross state division rival, and also spoke about a little bit of perspective on facing of the likes of Chicago, Dallas, in the division, even Winnipeg at one point when they made it to the Western Conference Final. All many battles in those rivalries there, and obviously multiple 30-goal score. And now I'm now looking at it with the understanding of Bill Zito getting a guy like Tarasenko scored a goal the other day, but also understanding the role and also what it takes to win. And it's great to see that he understands what it means to the other guys in the locker room.
Yeah, I mean he faced the Chicago Blackhawks at the height of their powers, and he faced off with the Dallas Stars teams that had so many good players, and he faced off with the San Jose Sharks team in that Western Conference Final in 2019 that has had so much success in the Western Conference side of the bracket. So, I mean, he knows what it's like to go against a team like the Tampa Bay Lightning, which they might not have the same amount of depth as they did when they made the Stanley Cup final 3 years in a row with guys like Andre Palat gone, but they still have one of the deepest teams in the league. They still have a lot of guys that have made deep playoff runs over the past decade, just like those Chicago Blackhawks teams that he had to face off with when he was in St. Louis. And he's a guy that knows what it takes to win and knows what it takes to beat those teams. And like you said, he's the guy who scored 30 goals a handful of times. So he is an elite player. He knows where to be on the ice, what to do to be able to beat those teams, and that's a veteran player you need to have around, especially when you're playing a very physical Tampa Bay Lightning team that knows what they're doing.
Yeah, and even going back to what you said about right place, right time, Vladimir Tarasenko spoke about that on not cracking under pressure when other teams might. That was a question asked by Doug Plagans when understanding through his experience and going through that. And also, he even answered the question on the Bennett injury too, going back to it and just knowing, hey, you know that these are going to happen in the postseason. You're just not going to get through unscathed with all the block shots, all the banging on the boards too, that you know that, hey, these are the guys that we got here. We gotta flip the page, and this is something that this is something about Palmer discusses about 24-hour segments of living in too for them. And Tarasenko understanding that guys are going to go up and down the lineup. You're going to have to call other people from time to time. You have your black aces whenever their season is over, which the Panthers AHL affiliate has not. But also that's really what the value of Tarasenko as a veteran too. So that's extremely helpful to have a guy like him in the locker room. But we're going to transition over to segment number 3, where we are going to turn the page now to the Battle of Florida, as the Florida Panthers will be taking on the Tampa Bay Lightning from Amalie Arena for Game 3 of this first round series in the Gulf Coast. We're going to discuss that and more here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Indeed. And when you're drafting your fantasy team, do you wish you could handpick the best stars for your business team? If you're building your talent roster, you need Indeed. Indeed is a hiring platform where you can attract, interview, and hire all in one place. Don't spend hours on multiple job sites looking for candidates with the right skills, but you can do it all with Indeed. Candidates you invite apply through Instant Match, 3 times more likely to apply to your job than candidates who will only see in search, according to U.S. Indeed data. With Indeed, matching as soon as your sponsor a post, you get a short list of quality candidates whose resume on Indeed match your job description. Boom, it's hiring at a warp speed. Indeed knows that when you're growing your own business, you have to make every dollar count. That's why with Indeed, you only pay for quality applications that match your must-have requirements. So visit Indeed.com/locked-on to start hiring now. And now you only get to pay for quality applications that meet your hiring criteria. Just go to Indeed.com/locked-on. Indeed.com/locked-on. Terms and conditions apply. Cost per application pricing not available for everyone. Need to hire? You need Indeed. Segment number 3 here on this Thursday, April 25th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day here on a Thursday. So the Florida Panthers versus the Tampa Bay Lightning from Amalie Arena, 7 p.m. puck drop on TBS with Kenny Albert, Brian Boucher, and Jody Shelley will be on the call here. And Colby, you know what's really great about this whole series as a whole, based even before the Panthers took the 2-0 lead, is with the Panthers and just getting their confidence through these 2 games. Yeah, you spoke about the Tampa Bay and how their depth is lacking, obviously with the bill being due for the cap, not being able to re-sign guys due to them keeping the main core guys who have helped them win. But with the Panthers, the 1-day gap in between games and the short travel, oh my goodness, I haven't even mentioned the luxury of travel with it. The Eastern Conference has a lot of short travel with every single series, and for the Panthers with these 1-day gaps, it really helps them literally take their show on the road and also get back to, and they don't, and for the also even on the Tampa Bay Lightning side of things, with them being down, they can quickly get back on the ice. So it works both ways with the winning team and the team that loses too. The winning team wants to get back because they want to just continue playing up to their confidence, and the losing team wants to get back to, because they don't want to ruminate in something in losing 2 very close games. So I think that's a big luxury as far as the schedule of this series. How are you saying this?
Yeah, and I mean, this is a Panthers team that has traveled well all year. They finished with the 2nd best road record in the league. They were just 1 point behind the Dallas Stars for that best road record in the league. But, I mean, this is a team that has a game that travels well, and it's going to be a raucous environment there in Tampa Bay tomorrow. That building is always really loud. And I mean, all year, this team has proven that it's been able to go into any hostile environment and play its game, because they don't play to sell tickets on the road. They play a hard-checking defensive game. They have the players that are able to go in there and play with a lot of pressure on them. So, I mean, they're able to kind of just brush off the win from yes from Tuesday, get that quick plane ride in. They skated a little bit on Wednesday, and they're going to be able to go out there and play their game the same way they do at home. And they all year they've proven that they're one of the best road teams in the league. And as long as they can take one in Tampa Bay, they're going to have a good chance to finish up the series back at home in Sunrise.
Yeah, you are guaranteed after Tuesday at least 4 more games in your season. So that's the great thing about getting off to the start. And also, Maurice spoke about something that I ended segment number 2 with, is about living in 24-hour segments based on every moment of the season. And also, it goes back to a quote that he said last season, which I still can't get it out of my mind, based on enjoy and having fun in the middle of everything. Because yeah, these players are trying to shoot for the ultimate goal of winning the Stanley Cup, but also about having fun in the process too. And that's really hard. Even Luongo spoke about his time in Vancouver, how he wished he enjoyed the present moment too more while he was there. Sergei Bobrovsky spoke about his save too, after the game, very nonchalant about it. Even Maurice spoke about his him being nonchalant too about it. So really, the fact that they get to still go moment by moment, and all, and going into slowly transitioning into the next venue, into the next game, and just get it done right away. I think it's going to be a big luxury for the Panthers. Obviously, you're not going to have the last change. We see Tampa Bay, how it was a house of horrors for the Panthers even before, but they haven't, in the regular season, since their playoff series in 2022, they're over 500 in Amalie. But regular season, everything goes out the window based on the postseason. But 2-0 series lead, got there has to be some level of worth based on their confidence level from what they've done in the regular season in Tampa Bay going into this one. Even though Paul Maurice in their last matchup is when they scored 9 goals, not something really you could evaluate. You really want to evaluate how well you control your gaps, how you make that first pass out of the zone, and how you transition up the ice. That's what he looked at, and that's really what you could appreciate as far as like evaluating this team.
I mean, to your point in the beginning of that, I mean, you have a team that has a lot of guys that are able to have fun in the middle of the games there and keep the locker room fresh and loose. And I mean, that's why this team is so good in those tight games, because you don't have guys dwelling over things and kind of being tight in those tight games. You have guys that are able to stay loose and be able to make those plays, not really thinking about how big the moment is, because you have jokes going on in the locker room. You have guys like Nick Cousins and Brandon Montour and the plenty of other really funny personalities in there who are able to kind of lighten the mood and remind everybody that you're still out there having fun. And in those moments, you're not really thinking about how big the moment is. You're just out there playing your game and having fun. And that's what the Panthers are so good at when it comes to coming into those hostile environments or in that tight game. They're out there just focused on the game plan, focused on having fun with it, making the right plays at the right times, as Anton Lundell is referred to a lot. And that's why this team's game travels so well. That's why this team's game is so good in the playoffs, as it showed last year, because they're able to kind of channel that in. They're not thinking about how important the prize is. They're just being loose, thinking about winning that hockey game and accomplishing what they need to do on a 24-hour scale while still enjoying it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Lundell spoke about weeks ago how he's very fortunate to have the beginning of his career in multiple playoff series, where you see a guy like Jeff Skinner in Buffalo, who didn't make the postseason while he was in Carolina. And then he goes to Buffalo, and that continues for him, and still having over 1,000 games and not stiffing the postseason once. So something that Lundell definitely doesn't take for granted. And also, one final thing before we get out of here is just really continuing just thinking about the year before and how when you when you have guys who started game one in a Giovanni Smith, and then you had guys like Zach Dalpe in the lineup too in the beginning of in the postseason. Grigory Denisenko played in the final game of the Stanley Cup final, obviously because they were battered and bruised by that time. But even before Lomberg came out of the lineup due to his illness, Maurice spoke about how fourth line was the second, sixth line was the fourth for them, and obviously a lot of cap space opened up this offseason due to that, but also gave them a chance to get familiar guys, Kulikov, Stenlin in the mix too. So you're now Zito's been at the helm for 4 years, Maurice in too. So it's now seeing guys who are familiar with based on what the core pieces were already built here, and just finding your great combination of guys who are just committed to something bigger than themselves. And also that's real. And when you see that the Panthers depth, how it sometimes I don't necessarily always believe in next man up, because the next man up isn't always as talented as the next one. But if you're talking about like the middle six and the bottom six guys, then that next man up can make plenty of sense as far as guys who are still committed to playing a system of a simple game of strong forechecking and creating chances off turnovers.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, like you said, and like we said earlier in the show too, you have a guy like Kyle Oposo who has experience being that guy who can be a second or third liner on a playoff team. He's had plenty of big moments on the New York Islanders there. He scored 12 goals this year, sometimes playing the fourth line role, sometimes stepping up, and he's a guy that can step up, can get you points. Jonah Gadjevich has played big minutes on the fourth line throughout the year, so he's a guy that can step in and play some playoff games. You have in the press box, you have a pretty long list of guys that are able to kind of step in there who know the system, know their roles, and are able to do a pretty good job of it. So yeah, this is a deeper team than they had last year. And also to your point on Anton Lundell, I mean, another guy who's benefited a lot from playing in a system like this has been Sam Reinhart. I mean, he was in Buffalo for so many years. He was a good player. He scored 20 to 30 goals a year, and he was a plus defender. But as soon as you put him in a system like this where his instincts are really high. So when you have him in a situation where he's playing big minutes defensively, he can kill penalties, and he's playing to a system where he's playing hard on the defensive end, and he's able to find the holes, use his shot. All of a sudden, he's a 50-goal player who can play real good defense. That's kind of the thing about playing in a good system, that once you get in there and you have real talent like an Anton Lundell or a Sam Reinhart, you can come through in those big moments if you can just find those holes.
Yeah, and we've seen it over and over again in the Zito era of guys who didn't necessarily succeed in other places or not have team success, and then them come over here, and some guys with untapped potential have really taken that next level in their game. And hopefully for the Panthers in this instance, they will create that for to extend their lead in the series and beyond for that. And truly, it's once again something I say for South Florida: don't take these moments for granted, for sure, for them. But Colby, I want to thank you so much once again for joining me on this edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. We will be seeing each other in just less than 12 hours, as you will be taking an early morning flight over here to Tampa. But before we sign off here, tell everybody where they can find your work online.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter /X whatever you want to call it, at Colby D Guy, and you can find the large majority of my work at FloridaHockeyNow.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much, my friend, and I will see you soon. And if you like what you're hearing, please subscribe to the podcast to be notified every single time the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast jumps into your podcast feed. Don't forget to also subscribe to the other shows on Locked On NHL Network, including Locked On NHL, Locked On Fantasy Hockey with Flip Livingstone and Steve Roden, and Locked On NHL Prospects. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. So I'm Armando Velez with Colby Guy, and you've been listening to Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We're your team every day.